This tutorial is about using effects layers in Photoshop. What are effects layers? Effects layers are additional layers that create color or texture in an image. Effects layers use the filters menu in Photoshop to create interesting results within your image. Effects layers may also use layer blending modes in the layers panel and or layer opacity, also in the layers panel, to combine with other parts of the image. Finally, you can combine lots of different effects layers to create unusual effects, colors, or textures. So I'm going to use a few tricks with this strawberry image taken out in our garden. And what I want to do is I want to make the strawberry stand out more than it already does. And I want to make the background kind of swirly and textured. So what I'm going to start off with doing is I'm going to always make a copy of my background layer just in case I mess it up. I've got a backup copy down here to work with. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection of just my strawberry. So using the quick select tool in this case, I'm going to select. And the quick select tool lets me just sort of paint a selection. Now I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool and I'm going to set this to subtract because I want to get rid of that leaf section there. I'm going to do this in pieces. Every time I make a selection, I always find myself sculpting my selection, changing the way it's laid out, getting rid of parts and adding parts. And the magnetic lasso tool, as you may know, grabs the edge of a boundary between two colors. So it wanted to find the space where the strawberry ends based on its color or its light properties. Let me try something else. The magic wand tool, if I drag the tolerance down to something like 10, I just want to add to, here's my add to selection, and I'm going to add that area just down there. That's pretty low tolerance. I'm going to go back up to 20. And I want to just add the strawberry so I get most of the strawberry in place. Then I can use the regular lasso tool and add to selection and really finish the job off. Now I'm ready to go. Now I'm probably going to wind up making this selection a few times. So rather than keep doing this work every time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the selection. So select, save selection, and I'm going to call this strawberry. Now I'm going to invert the selection. Let's zoom out to see what that looks like. Right now just the strawberry, then I choose select and inverse, and I'm going to save this one too. Save selection. I'm just going to call this all else. Someday I'll be able to spell. Here we go. Else. There we go. So what I want to be able to do is I want to create some effects for just the background. So if I make a new layer, and I've got my colors here set to black and white, I'm going to choose filter, render, and clouds. Now a lot of layers are going to require me to have something on them in terms of color or paint to make it work, but the clouds will just paint themselves right in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the opacity and drag it down. Something else I could do, I could mess with the layer blend mode. So let's try these out. And dissolve, let's put the opacity back up. I can use dissolve. Well, I guess let's drag it back down. What this does, it affects the way it appears with stuff behind it. Darken, multiply, and really, you know what, I really don't know what half these do most of the time, but I just bounce through until I see what I like. And I'm going to go back up to dissolve, I think, because I like that sort of grainy texture to it. Or multiply. Now I do know what multiply does. I feel pretty smart there. Multiply will make the white areas transparent and the black areas opaque. So let's try dissolve again. And what I'm going to do with this now is let's crank the opacity back up. What I want to do next is use another filter called distort. And distort does require stuff to be on there. So I can twirl, and the twirl has a setting on it. I can twist this around, and I want to swirl. Oh, that's kind of neat. Okay, so that swirled everything else. Some of the stuff behind was transparent now. So let me change the transparency now. So I want that in there. And I don't want it too bold, but I just want it maybe sort of subtle. So the level of opacity will determine how much I can see behind it. So what I've done now is I've created a copy of my background layer. So I've now got 3 copies. I've got a backup, which I may as well hide. I've got the one that's active, which is there. And then I've got this copy that I'm going to try to create some additional effects with. So let's take this one. I still have my active selection from everything else besides the strawberry, and I'm going to choose filter, artistic, and I'm going to try watercolor. Now, the truth is I never know where this is going when I try stuff out, so I'm going to zoom out somewhat so I can see what it's going to look like if I decide to keep this this effect. So try different things out, try rough pastels, and it should change the look of my picture. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to try different settings on these until I like what I see. And again, I don't know what they do half the time. I try to think of what is the, scaling may have to do with, in this case, the canvas or the surface it's on. So I might not see it unless I zoom in a little bit. And there you can see some of the effects that are happening. So there's a little bit of what's happening. Let's bring up the stroke length, which means that the lengths of the pastel, virtual pastels really, get longer. And if I bring down the detail, they might get wider. Let's see. So I'm trying things out, and I like this effect, but that's without it. Let's get rid of that for a second. So there's the effect, and there's not the effect. Okay, so now I've got some texture on my background, and what I want to do next is try to add some additional effects to continue to obscure the background. So like we learned before, we can even add an adjustment layer to it. So here's an adjustment layer, and let's choose hue and saturation. So I'm combining a few different things here. Let's bring up the lightness, bring down the lightness. We can try a few things out. Reduce the saturation to make it more black and white. I can even change the hue to change which end of the color spectrum it leans towards. And if I want to go back the way it was, I click on this little circle button, that little reset, and it goes back to the way it was at natural. So I'm going to mess with the lightness. I'm going to bring down the saturation. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm happy there. Okay, I really like messing with cloud effects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this layer going again. And if I add a new layer and I render some clouds into it, filter, render, clouds, so it's an empty layer, and I'm going to reduce the opacity again. Now I'm going to try something different. Select, gosh, I guess I should select that piece where the strawberry is and move it out. But I think what I'll do later is bring a strawberry at the top. So I'm just going to take this piece here and use filter and blur and motion blur. So now what I'll do is try to get this blur just to create some sort of texture and line across the image. I'm not too happy with that. So I'm going to bring the opacity back up so you can see what's happening to my effects. Filter, blur, and I'm going to try motion again. And that really is not quite as interesting as I'd like it to be. I can rotate the angle. Oh, that's better. Until I like what I see. And then I can sort of slide that slider down. Okay, and that's kind of okay. Now I do want to put the strawberry on top of all that. Let's try one more thing first though. Let's go filter, and let's try this interesting one. We try stylize. Stylize, find edges. And what that does is sort of changes the layer into, well, it didn't do much to it at all, did it? So let's undo that. The way I'm going to undo it is I'm going to use my history panel and back up until I get back to where I was. So there's that. Okay. So again, let me try some other filters. So it doesn't always work out, as you can see, but sometimes I find something I like in the process. So artistic, I'm going to try colored pencil on that one. That doesn't look too good. Let's try palette knife, rough pastels. There we go. Rough pastels. So there, if I bring up the opacity all the way, you'll see I've sort of created that effect on it. And I'm going to leave that sort of semi-transparent. I might try some different blend modes. And again, you just sort of have to mess with it until you like what you see. It's not always about memorizing what each of them, all of them do. You sort of have to just try things out, and then you start developing a sense of which ones seem to be your favorites. So I like that. I'm going to take one copy of the strawberry though. Let's go back to my original background copy. Let's make a new copy of that one, and let's get everything else selected. So load selection. I'm going to get the all else, because I'm going to delete. And as you can see my thumbnail over here, when I hit delete, all I have left on that is the strawberry. Nothing changed here so much unless I take this layer and drag it to the top. So now my strawberry's at the top. I undo my selection, and that's sort of an interesting image now. So it's got a variety of effects in it. One more thing I can do, just for thrills, is if I select just the strawberry, and I want to apply a adjustment layer to this. So what I'm going to do is use vibrance. Now we used vibrance before to reduce saturation. This time let's use it to really make that strawberry, too much is too much, but we can bring it up just a bit. So originally it looked like this, and now I'm going to bring that up just a smidge, maybe bring up the saturation. Too much saturation there, so if we bring it down to close to 0, or maybe even take some off, that looks kind of fun. Okay, that's some examples of how to use effects layers and adjustment layers to create some more interest in your picture.